The cameras flash, the red overalls gleam, and there, in the middle of Maranello's heartbeat, stands a man who has defined an entire era of Formula One. Lewis Hamilton. For years, the idea seemed like fantasy. The seven-time world champion in Ferrari Red? It was the kind of speculation whispered by fans, imagined by journalists, and dismissed by many as nothing more than wishful thinking. But now, it's reality. Hamilton's move to Ferrari isn't just a transfer between teams. It's a story heavy with history, expectation, and danger. Because when you leave behind the security of Mercedes, the team that made you a legend, and walk into the temple of Ferrari, you're not just racing cars anymore. You're wrestling with destiny, and the world is watching. But here's what nobody tells you about fairy tales coming true. They can become nightmares. Hamilton's first season at Ferrari has been a masterclass in frustration, strategy blunders that cost victories, a teammate who refuses to be overshadowed, and a car that promises everything but delivers heartbreak. The man who once dominated Formula One for over a decade is learning a cruel lesson. Wearing red doesn't guarantee glory. It guarantees pressure unlike anything he's ever faced. Because at Ferrari, you don't just drive for a team. You carry the weight of a nation. And for Hamilton, that weight grows heavier with every lost opportunity. And yet, there's a reason this story captured the imagination of millions long before it became reality. For decades, Formula One's greatest legends, Fangio, Lauda, Schumacher, have been measured not only by their victories, but by whether they ever wore Ferrari red. Ferrari isn't just a constructor. It's a myth, a religion, a symbol of motorsport itself. Every driver, even the greatest, has asked themselves the same question. What if I drove for Ferrari? For Hamilton, the answer was delayed by a partnership that defined modern F1. His bond with Mercedes was one of the most successful unions in sporting history. Together, they won 6 titles, shattered records, and turned dominance into routine. The Silver Arrows didn't just give Hamilton a car, they gave him a dynasty. But dynasties don't last forever. After years of supremacy, Mercedes stumbled. Their once unbeatable machine became fragile, inconsistent, and no longer capable of delivering world championships. Hamilton found himself staring at a crossroads. Stay loyal to a fading empire, or take one final, audacious leap. Ferrari had been calling, quietly, patiently. And when the timing aligned, Hamilton, never afraid of risk. But as the season wore on, the rivalry sharpened. Leclerc fought fiercely to prove Ferrari was still his team. Hamilton, unwilling to fade, answered back with the experience and racecraft that had defined his career. 2 lions in the same cage. Ferrari had dreamed of this lineup, the greatest veteran and the brightest young star. But what they got was a battlefield within their own garage. And yet, this is Lewis Hamilton. Adversity is not new to him. He's fought through controversy, political battles, and machinery that wasn't always the fastest. He thrives when his back is against the wall. In press conferences, his tone remained measured. "We're building," he'd say, step by step. In the garage, he pushed engineers harder, demanded more precision, refused to accept the familiar excuse of, "That's just Ferrari." On track, the flashes of brilliance returned. Bold overtakes that made crowds rise to their feet. Qualifying laps where he seemed to will the car beyond its limits. And when a Ferrari, draped in Hamilton's skill, surged past the finish line, the roar from Tifosi felt like thunder. Hope flickered again. Maybe, just maybe, this gamble would pay off. But hope alone does not win championships. The gaps to Red Bull remained real. The mistakes still cost dearly. And time, cruel as ever, continued its march. The 2025 season unfolded not as a smooth fairy tale, but as a drama scripted by fate itself. Red Bull still towered above the grid, their car relentless in its precision. But Ferrari, with Hamilton in red, began to fight differently. No longer content with second best, Hamilton demanded that the team aim higher, that every race be treated as a chance for glory. Silverstone was the first true glimpse of what Ferrari's gamble could mean. In front of his home crowd, Hamilton and Leclerc went wheel to wheel in a duel that felt destined for highlight reels. Cops, Stowe, Abbey, Corners taken on the knife's edge, neither willing to yield. When the dust settled, Hamilton crossed the line ahead. It wasn't just a podium, it was a declaration. At nearly 40 years old, he still had the fire to outduel the sport's best. The Tifosi roared with pride, and the British fans who once watched him dominate in silver cheered his rebirth in red. But triumph proved fleeting. At Hungary, Ferrari's pit wall faltered again. Hamilton, running in a strong second, was left out on degrading tires while rivals undercut him. Over the radio, his voice betrayed his disbelief. "Guys, come on! We've thrown this away." Another podium slipped through their fingers. Then came Singapore, a night that should have rewritten history. Ferrari had the pace to win, Red Bull stumbled, and Hamilton led with calm precision. For 40 laps, victory was his. But under the bright city lights, disaster struck. A mistimed pit call, a wheel gun delay, 4 seconds vanished. In Formula One, that's an eternity. Hamilton rejoined, and yet, amid the chaos, something remarkable was stirring. Hamilton's presence was beginning to reshape Ferrari's DNA. He wasn't just a driver, he was an institution. His refusal to accept mediocrity forced engineers to dig deeper, strategists to sweat over every scenario, mechanics to sharpen their execution. Gone were the casual excuses of old. Hamilton held meetings late into the night, questioning every failure, dissecting every detail. He reminded Ferrari what it felt like to be hungry again. Even Leclerc, initially threatened, found himself raised by the rivalry. Pushed by Hamilton's relentless standards, his own performances sharpened. Together, their competition elevated Ferrari from a team of excuses into a team of fighters. The gap to Red Bull began to shrink. Not every weekend, not consistently, but enough to make the paddock take notice. For the first time in years, Ferrari didn't just feel like a symbol. They felt like a threat. But for Hamilton, this wasn't just about incremental progress, it was about legacy. At 39, the clock ticked louder with every passing season. The equation was brutally simple. If he wins a championship in red, Hamilton transcends from legend to myth. He would join Fangio and Schumacher as the man who conquered Ferrari's curse, becoming not just Britain's hero, but Italy's, the Tifosi's eternal champion. If he fails, then his Ferrari chapter risks becoming a tragic epilogue. The greatest driver of his generation, lured by romance, undone by a team forever haunted by its own mistakes. This razor's edge is what makes his story impossible to ignore. Win or lose, the gamble defines him. Already, Hamilton's move has changed the sport. Ferrari's global magnetism, amplified by his presence, has reignited Formula One's cultural firepower. Grandstands overflow with Tifosi waving red flags. Ratings surge as new fans tune in just to see Hamilton in scarlet. Rival teams, even begrudgingly, admit Ferrari feels alive again. In interviews, young drivers cite him as inspiration. Sponsors line up to ride the Ferrari-Hamilton wave. Formula One thrives on stories larger than life, and no story is larger than this: the GOAT and Ferrari Red fighting destiny itself. So how is it going for Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari? The answer is both glorious and brutal. There are moments when the dream feels real, Silverstone triumphs, daring overtakes, Tifosi thunder. But there are also scars, Singapore heartbreaks, pit wall blunders, and the haunting sense that time is slipping away. Yet perhaps that is the essence of this story. Formula One has never been about easy victories. Its greatest legends are forged in fire, in heartbreak, in the moments when triumph seems impossible but is chased anyway. Hamilton in Ferrari Red is not just chasing wins, he is chasing immortality. Every lap is a step closer to the answer. Will he lift Ferrari back to the summit, or will the red suit become the heaviest burden he ever carried? The sun sets over Monza. Red flags ripple in the twilight, and there, in the cockpit of a Ferrari, sits Lewis Hamilton. Eyes fixed, hands steady, destiny waiting. The story is not finished. The question still lingers. Will Lewis Hamilton, in the twilight of his career, bring Ferrari back to glory? Or will history remember his final gamble as the greatest risk that never paid off? Only time and the roar of engines will tell.